Joining me now is Michael Cohen. He's a former personal attorney and fixer for Donald Trump. He's the host of the Mea Culpa podcast, the author of the upcoming book, Revenge, How Donald Trump Weaponized the U.S. Department of Justice Against His Critics, which is ironic, Michael. I don't know if this part of the story is going to make it into you, but this is the Department of Justice coming after Donald Trump. Michael, good to see you. First of all, talk to me about this safe. Did you know about this particular safe?
So the answer is no. I've never known about the safe. I know he had one in New York. I knew that there were locked cabinets, which were basically in the control of Matt Calamari, but I've never actually seen any of these sort of safes. You know, one thing, Ali, as I was listening to your earlier segment, one thing that everybody keeps talking about is, why were these documents, you know, it's where these documents were located, meaning at Mar-a-Lago. I think the real question that needs to be looked at here is, why were they being kept at Mar-a-Lago? All right, there's no doubt in my mind that Donald had to know that the documents were there. No matter who else may or may not be involved. Nothing goes on in Mar-a-Lago, nothing goes on in Trump world without Donald Trump's specific knowledge. So the real question should be, why? Why were these documents being kept there? Was there a nefarious purpose? I don't know. Why else would anybody keep, you know, classified documents in an off-site location?
Well, you know this guy. You know this guy better than anyone. So help us get some insight into what the possible why could be, because his allies would have you believe this is all innocent. He declassified the documents before they went to Mar-a-Lago, and whatever. No one's been able to explain. Are they souvenirs? Are they just mementos he wanted to keep? No one's given us a why.
Yeah, so rest assured that these are not the love letters from Kim Jong-un or Vladimir Putin or anybody else that Donald thought was in love with him. That's not what these documents are. You know, these are nuclear documents. These are also, you're right, we don't even know exactly what the content of the documents are. And then the best part is, look how clever that the guy is. In advance of everything that's going to happen, what does he come out and he say? He says that all of these documents have been declassified before they got to Mar-a-Lago. I'd like to see a document showing that they're declassified, because, again, he's going to claim, well, I told somebody to do it. He's going to look to shift blame, which is exactly what, you know, this guy does. He shifts blame to everyone else except for himself.
He's talked about how Obama did the same thing. He's saying he didn't pack the stuff. How is he feeling right now? Because someone in his circle or someone around him, may not be a trusted advisor or something, but somebody around him who knows stuff about him is now an informant for the FBI. That much we know. The name's been redacted, so we don't know who that is. What happens to Donald Trump when he feels that there's someone betraying him?
Yeah, this is a big problem for him, because normal circumstances, quite a few people that are around him. So he's able to shift to the next person. Here, he's not sure who he can shift to. He's not sure if it's Melania. He's not sure if it's one of the kids. Now, you may remember, for over a year and a half now, I've been saying the whole issue with Kushner, to me, just seems awfully odd, in the fact that he, who was Secretary of Everything in the White House, Secretary of Everything, that he seems to be escaping any sort of attention, any, you know, legal issues. And so I've been saying for a long time, that just doesn't make a lot of sense to me. But then again, that's just my opinion. I personally have always thought that Kushner was the guy that would end up turning on his father-in-law first.
Let's talk about something you tweeted on Thursday, which I thought was quite interesting, given your own personal experience after you were investigated by the FBI and prosecuted and convicted. Donald Trump is claiming that the FBI raid on Mar-a-Lago is a weaponization of the justice system. Sounds familiar, Donald. Is this the same justice system that you weaponized against me?
Hence the book Revenge. Right? How Donald Trump weaponized the United States Department of Justice to go against his critics. Now, it's not just me. I understand that about a month ago that some information came out that he did the same thing to James Comey and to McCabe. And those are just two additional people. So the answer is yes. And then, again, Donald Trump does not do things new. Everything is sort of a regurgitation of what he had done before. You may recall during the raid on my home hotel and my law office, you may recall that Trump turned around and claimed that the FBI ransacked the place, that that they destroyed it, that they pinned me up against the wall, and all this other nonsense. None of it being true. Right? The FBI was professional. They were courteous. They were respectful. So I guarantee you they were no different at Mar-a-Lago either. It's just this is how Donald Trump behaves. Why? Because he wants you, the audience, to believe that he's the victim. He's always the victim. In fact, he's not the victim. And again, it's what I talk about in this book, Revenge. He's not the victim. He's the perpetrator.
Michael, thank you for taking time to join us this morning. We always appreciate your insight. Michael Cohen is a former personal attorney for Donald Trump and the host of the Mea Culpa podcast and the author of the upcoming book, Revenge.